This is Jenny Larson conducting my first interview with Perry Bedford at the Susanna Dickinson Museum on October 4th, 2014. This interview is part of the Conversations to Create Unity oral history project conducted by the Susanna Dickinson Museum and Baylor University. So thank you for coming and speaking with us.
No problem.
So I wondered if you would start just by talking to us about when you were born, where you were born, these sort of like early years of Perry.
Okay. Well, I was born in Austin, Texas. I grew up in Southwest Austin, Texas. William Cannon and Westgate, basically. Lived there until 18, 19, when I started college. So I know how it was growing up in like Southwest Austin. To me, it was like more kind of like more comfortable, people like not afraid to speak to you, come up to you to say, hello, how's your day going? Completely different than where I live now.
So where do you live now?
Northwest Austin.
Okay. And so describe what that is.
Northwest Austin, it has more of kind of like a standoffish kind of energy, to me at least. Like people are kind of like, hey, how's it going? Like kind of like, what do you want from me? Kind of speed it up, let's go about our own business. I guess like some friends kind of compared it to being more like family centric, like that people not willing to branch out outside of their family versus like growing up in South Austin, I'm used to random people speaking to you, saying hello.
So talk to me about your first elementary school.
I went to, I kind of went to a private school up until first grade, and then second grade to fifth grade I went to a different elementary school. I went to Anderson Creative Learning Center. It was mostly minorities, so Hispanic and Black students. Classes were pretty small, so like you were used to like seeing the same kids like all the time. Like as the years progressed, even though I was there like pre-kindergarten to first grade, still, okay, we've been in the same class for 3 years. And then my mom decided to take me to, she was gonna try and send me to Peace Elementary School, but I'm thinking that it had some kind of waiting list, or it's more kind of like maybe, I don't know if it was a private school kind of focus, but it was like you had to be on a waiting list, and it was very like reduced students allowed to attend or something like that. So then she sent me to Cunningham instead. So I went to Cunningham Elementary School from 2nd to 5th grade. And so it's like starting the whole like making friends thing all over again. So there's this funny moment like that pops in my head, like when I made my first friend. Like I just remember my mom like dropping me off, and she's like, okay, I'm gone, and then she leaves, and I'm like start crying because I don't know anybody. And then this girl steps up and she's like, don't worry, I'll take care of him. And it's funny because like I haven't seen her since like elementary school, but she recently found me on Facebook. So at least I keep in contact with her on Facebook, and still remember like that memory of Bonnie.
So if you're comparing the Anderson Creative Learning Center, you said the demographic was primarily minority. Mm-hmm. What was Cunningham Elementary like?
I was used to being like the one Black boy in all my classes, like for all the years that I was there. Yeah, I guess just thinking of like the kids that were there, it was maybe I was one of 3 Black boys that I can remember in the whole grade, and there was maybe 4 or 5 total Black girls in the whole grade. So it was like kind of like that demographic the whole time in elementary school. So I was just used to always be like, oh, it's me and Lena, and or like kind of like switch out in between classes sometimes.
And did that ever affect your experiences with your Playmates and?
I guess like I was kind of used to it, so it was never strange. I mean, that's what I knew. Because I guess when you're like in first grade, you don't really think about that, and when you get kind of older, you start like noticing more differences. So, I guess like the divide was more kind of like if you did like sports, or if you're like more football centric, or oh, let's do Foursquare during recess, and so.
So after Cunningham, where did you go?
I went to Bedichek Middle School. And that I was kind of starting over from scratch again in the friends, because everyone that I went to elementary school went to Porter Middle School. So it's like, oh, okay, me and 5 other kids that I've known like 2nd to 5th grade, like went to the same middle school. So it's kind of different because middle school is more, well, it was more of like the whole kind of coming into terms of like establishing your status and excuse me, challenging people, like the whole, oh, let me see who's going to be the biggest, baddest thing. So it's like the initiation of that starting. So it's different.
And what was the demographic of your middle school?
Definitely more Black people, but I was still, well, also I was doing some honors classes. The divide that I noticed, it was maybe a handful of Black kids doing the honors classes. So it was always like the same people, same faces all over again. I was still like the only Black guy doing the honors classes. So it's like the girls would kind of swap out, and it was just always be, oh, okay, Perry and Rochelle have class this time, and then Perry and Mary have class this time. So it's like, it was, oh, hey, how's it going?
So, hearing that, and then also something you said earlier about these sort of new pressures about identity in middle school, I wonder if you can speak to that more,
Okay.
and maybe some personal experiences that you had with those.
Like growing up in middle school, or like,
Yeah.
okay. Let's see. I noticed like a lot of the minorities and Black kids and Hispanic kids would focus more on more kind of urban culture or things happening. I guess the best way I could say it would be like stereotypical kind of stereotypical things that society has kind of adapted as like, oh, this is a Black thing, this is a Mexican thing, this is like urban thing. So like hip hop music, baggy jeans, like style. I don't know. And then like my mom, I didn't grow up dressing that way, because like my mom just didn't buy clothes like that. She's like, I want to put you in polos, more fitted jeans, but like not super fitted, like nicer, not so
I know what you mean, though. And did you feel pressure because you were not following the sort of like steps of like, this is what your identity should be?
I didn't feel pressured. If anything, I was more kind of ostracized because I was the kid that did not dress that way. So it's kind of put a divide between me and the rest of like the Black kids. But also there was like, also the classes kind of created that divide as well, because like most of the other Black kids were taking like the regulars classes. They weren't taking the honors classes as well with me. So I think it was both the classes and I guess a sense of style too.
So another thing that you had said earlier that I want to kind of call out or pull back out into the conversation, you said that when we were talking about elementary school, you talked about, you know, not really realizing or feeling any kind of pressure about the difference in demographics, but that there were older realizations. And I wonder if you can speak to sort of, you know, maybe specific incidences, or a time in your life, or like when those realizations started happening?
I could think of one time in elementary school. One of my friends, Chris, we were playing on the playground. We were talking about, I don't know what we were talking about, but I remember like getting kind of emotional and thinking of like differences of race. And I don't know why I thought about this, but I was like, they were making fun, we were talking about Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck and all that. And I was just saying, why does the black duck have to like talk with the whole, like have all the bad things happen to him and all that, and it never gets his way? And then Chris like said, well, what about Donald Duck? He's white and he can't really speak that well. So that was like one of the first kind of like the incorporations of race into conversation. I think maybe that was possibly 4th grade. And also I remember going to like after school program. It was called extended care. So basically you get let out of school at 2:45 and your parents get off at like 5 o'clock. So you stay at the school until they pick you up. And this one girl, her name was Allison. And I remember we were playing in extended care and we were playing a game and she got mad because she kept losing. It was like maybe checkers or Connect 4. And she just said the N-word. So I was like, wow. Like, that was the first time ever being called the N-word. And you're like a 4th grader being called the N-word by like a girl that's maybe in 1st grade or 2nd grade. Yeah. So I remember saying, my response was like, well, I'd rather be a nice, colorful sheet of brown paper than a dingy white piece of paper. So, I don't know. I just knew like it was a derogatory word, like reference towards black people. I didn't like have that solid understanding, like this is a word from hatred kind of deal.
So that makes me want to ask about maybe conversations you've had with your mom. So I'm thinking of this, 4th grade boy who goes home is like, I've had these conversations today. And so can you maybe talk a little bit about that, about your experience of your mom kind of navigating you in this world?
I remember my mom, her biggest thing, like she would always tell me when I was first starting to go to school, it's like, if anyone ever asks you what color you are, to say, I'm black, and that you're proud to be that color, you're happy with being that color. She would always kind of instill that whole, like, that message inside of me. So I remember, like, I had a black My Buddy, I had a black Cabbage Patch, like, those are just normal things that my mom wanted me to kind of identify. Like, there's not just the blonde hair, blue-eyed people in the world. There's people with brown skin. There's Native American people. There's all shades. So, but you have to also know who you are and what you are, because these are what people are going to see you as. And you have to be proud of who you are and what you are.
Let's pause. All right, we had a guest walk into the museum, but we're back again. And I think we were talking about your conversations with your mom. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like she was just incredibly empowering, loving. I wonder, what were her reactions when did you talk to her about any of the racism that you had experienced when you were a kid?
To be honest, like, I never even brought it up to her. I don't know why. I just kind of figured, like, when it happened, it was kind of squashed then, or at least that's how I saw it. So I didn't come home with, like, oh no, my feelings are hurt kind of deal.
So I wondered if we could go back to that teasing out the realizations question, because I'm imagining there might be, you told a couple of elementary school moments. I wonder if there are any other sort of things that you can pinpoint throughout your, growing up.
Mm-hmm. Let's see.
And if that seems like something that you're like, oh, nothing's coming to the, right away. I wonder if you might be able to, we've talked about elementary school, middle school, maybe we can talk a little bit about high school and where you went and what that experience and demographic and all of that stuff was.
Okay. High school, I went to Crockett High School, David Crockett High School in Southwest Austin. The demographic was pretty similar to middle school, only it was like just more kids. Like I think my freshman year, my class was 800 or 900 students alone for the freshman class. But it was pretty divided, like based on what culture, not culture, I guess what social culture you identified with. For lack of better terms, like some of the terminologies that we had were like the kickers, the breakers, and kickers were like the cowboy kind of country people, and the breakers were kind of like the breakdancing people. Some people would call the like the hip hop people the ghetto people, but I didn't like that term. So there were the preppy people, the athletes, the baseball people, softball, football people, basketball people.
Who were your people?
I was kind of like a floater. I knew people like in all the different groups, and I had them in all different groups in my classes. So, although one friend said like, because like I had like a crew of like people that we would just always talk in the mornings, because we just always got dropped off like an hour and a half before school started, so we just stayed in the cafeteria and talked. A couple of them were more gossipy. So my friend Dondi, he would always like, oh, you're part of gossipers. I'm like, I'm not part of them. We just talk together and, I don't know, they gossip. But I had friends and everything, theater, football, basketball.
So you said that you grew up in Southwest Austin and really were there until you were 18. So your childhood, coming of age. Were you in the same house?
In the same house. My parents still live in the same house. So it's like, they've been in the house since it was built. They're the original owners. It was built when they were pregnant with my brother, and he's 7 years older than me. So like 74, 75. And they still live in the house. And so whenever I'm in South Austin, I'm at the house or stop by.
I wonder if you can talk to me about how you have witnessed that neighborhood change. I know in the beginning of the interview you talked about it being very friendly. What else can you tell me about it then and now?
Well, the neighborhood, my mom, she was kind of like overprotective in a sense, like she didn't want me staying outside. I'm thinking of different stories or different kind of memory sayings and topics. One thing that's kind of common in Black culture is not getting too much darker, or like staying out in the sun and getting more tan, and I don't know. So she's like, don't stay out in the sun too long, you're gonna get blackest. I don't know what. So it's kind of funny because my mom, here she is like, be proud of the color that you are, but you're this color, stay that color, don't get dark. I don't know. But yet my brother, he's like probably the darkest shade in our immediate family. So, oh gosh. And there's this one memory I have when I was in kindergarten, and like we had to make a cutout collage of our family. And I had made myself, my mom, and my dad first, and I used like the shade of, I don't know, it's maybe like not magenta, but like between magenta and like a faded kind of red color. And so I just cut us out, and then I was like, someone else had used that paper, and so there wasn't enough to make my brother. And so I had the option of like neon yellow or like black. And I saw someone had used a black piece of paper and they had like drawn with a white crown on it. I thought that was so cool. So I like cut it out and made my brother. And my mom sees it and she's like, "You purposely made your brother the darkest one on the paper because he's the darkest shade in the family." And I'm like, no, it was the only color paper left and I wasn't going to make him yellow. But I mean, I don't know. To this day, she thinks I did that purposely. When I was like 5 years old, I'm like, no, I just really ran out of the paper. I wanted to make us all the same paper. So, I don't know. That just popped in my head talking about the getting too dark. But, so there wasn't a lot of like interaction with the neighbors because my mom was just like, she's not a big, oh, let the neighbors come over, let's go over to neighbor's house person. But the neighbors, there was two main families that had stayed there for like years and years. And one of them has since moved like within the last year, but the other one's still there. So it was kind of like I kind of grew up with their kids. So that was cool.
And do you feel like the neighborhood has stayed the same?
The neighborhood has changed. It's still quiet for the most part. Excuse me. It's still quiet for the most part. But it's like people have been moving in and out of some of the houses. And so like the whole connection is kind of gone. Like you're used to seeing the same people every day. Like, oh, okay. There's so-and-so. He's going to sit on his porch like for most of the day. Or there's such working in their garden. Now it's kind of like, oh, there's a car there, there's a car gone.
So less kind of cozy or, people being a little bit more distant. So I wonder if we can open the sort of conversation about that experiencing change and talk about maybe like the larger Austin experience. And if you feel like you've noticed any changes from when you were a child to growing up, and specifically thinking about demographics again, going back to both what were the demographics of the neighborhood you grow up in, what are they in the neighborhood you live in now, and then the city as a whole.
Okay. I do feel like the demographic seems to be changing in Austin. Like growing up in the neighborhood that I live in, that I used to live in, like I was used to seeing more different faces, but yet people not afraid to kind of speak to each other or like kind of come out and like say hello. The neighborhood I live in now, it's like more of the same type of face. Excuse me. It's more of the same type of face where more kind of like it's more status, like Range Rovers, the Hummers and all that stuff. And they're colder. Not as friendly.
And how do you feel about those sort of same things in terms of Greater Austin?
Like it seems like more the heart of Austin is being kind of pushed out with like the building of Austin, just with the stuff that I've noticed. Because I just keep thinking of like people who have lived here for like years and years, like different generations, and they can't afford it because like they're building all these condos and they're building all the condos. The land is going up in price. Like I keep hearing stories of people wanting to buy houses and they have to like bid $20,000 over the asking price to even be considered when the houses are being like snatched up like crazy. And I don't know, East Austin doesn't look like East Austin anymore. But, I mean, some of the stuff is good. Like, it's like cleaner, some parts of it. Some parts aren't as shady anymore. But it's still kind of, I don't know, I'm lacking diversity. I don't see like the different faces as much anymore. Like I was used to going to East Austin with family to visit other family, and you used to like, oh, okay, there's more of the like minority people, more of the different faces, different cultures. And now it's kind of like, oh, okay, go to East Austin, it's like, oh, there's someone, it's hipsterville, for lack of better terms. So, I don't know. More of kind of like a fad versus like culture.
I wonder if you can speak to some more of your personal experiences as an Austinite, and continuing to kind of pull back to our project. So thinking about maybe if you have any personal experiences around politics or activism or law enforcement in Austin.
Ooh, well, one of my family members was a victim of police. Well, basically, he died by being pulled over by an overzealous cop that acted out of protocol. So that happened maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So it was pretty big in Austin. So I've kind of experienced it as as kind of being sort of attached, but kind of loosely attached aspect of seeing that happen with the family. I've been pulled over maybe several times, and one time I can remember was basically one of my friends had asked me for a ride home, and he was working at Culver's off of like Brody and William Cannon, and he worked until close, so he worked until 11, and then he lived off of East Riverside. And like at the time, the bus system, I don't know what it is now, but at the time he was working there, like the buses stopped running to that area of town by the time he got off. So I had to give him a ride to where he lived. And so I was just leaving his apartment complex. I see this police officer driving, past me. And then when I'm like about to leave the area to get on Riverside, I get flashed by the cops to pull over. And so he comes up to the car and he's like, "Did you realize that your inspection sticker is expired?" I'm like, "Oh no," because I don't know, it was my first car. I know this is stupid, but it was like my first car. I wasn't paying attention to the license and registration. I just know like in the mail you got a registration sticker, so you had to replace the registration. I did not think about the inspection sticker. And then he had said, "Did you know you rolled through a stop sign?" I'm like, "No, I didn't realize that." And then he's like, "Where were you going?" And he was persistently asking me where I was going, who I was with. And I was like, I was on my way home. I was with my friend that needed a ride home to his apartment. "Well, who's your friend?" I'm like, my friend's name is Tim. I know it's now it's kind of like sounding made up, but I'm like confused. Why are you asking me all these questions? I was like, and I remember asking him, "Oh, is everything okay? What's going on?" It's like, and he quickly got angry. He was like, "I'm doing my job. That's what's going on." And I was like, okay. And he kept asking me like who I was with, and he asked me that. I remember he asked me that at least 10 times. Where I was going, who I was with, and where was the friend now. And I told him, and then he told me to get out of the car. And I was like, I didn't know, I wasn't aware with like my rights or anything like that. So I was like, I didn't know like I could just sit there. It's like, no, I'm not gonna get out of the car. You could give me a ticket, and because you don't, I don't know. When you I had a cousin that's a cop, he's like, when you get out of the car, you vacate your rights for them not to search your vehicle or whatever. So I got out and he starts shining a light all in the car, looking and stuff. And he realized like he wasn't gonna find anything because I wasn't up to anything. And then like his tone completely changed. And I remember he said like he had pulled over 14 people earlier that day. And I wanted to ask him, did you find anything on the 14 people? But I was like, I'm just gonna go home because that's where I wanted to go originally and just leave it alone. So I guess that's probably the most extreme police officer encounter I've had in Austin.
Is that something that you talked about with your mom?
My mom, actually, I called her right when I got pulled over by the cop, and then I called her when I was on the way home, because I was still living with my parents at the time. And she's like, you need to be more careful, you know what happened to your cousin and all this other stuff, and it's just not safe, and you shouldn't be going out anywhere, I don't care, tell your friend to get another ride home, and all this stuff. I'm like, so it's kind of like, her response was out of fear of what could happen to me versus like, this is not right. It should not be happening in the first place.
And after the incident with your cousin, what did she kind of immediately have these conversations with you, or how did your family talk to you about that incident?
Well, it was pretty much all over the news. And so it's like, I got most of the information from the news or just protests and rallies and stuff. My mom, she was never really, let's have like these group discussions on like what's going on. If anything, my dad was more kind of like a discussion person, but like he would kind of get trumped out by my mom because she's like she's more vocal, and my dad's like, whatever, just let her have her way, kind of deal. But my mom, she was never, when it was like sadness regarding family, she wasn't big on talking about that. I think it just hit too close to home, so it'd always be like, let's talk about something else.
So, are there any other sort of personal experiences that had a big impact on you, and specifically about your experience with race in Austin?
In Austin, something popped in my head earlier, but I can't think about it. I can't remember what it was. I know going to college kind of made me realize how different Austin was from other parts of Texas, because I went to HBCU, which is a historical black college university, and like I went from being like the minority to becoming like the majority, and it's like, oh wow, there's like black people everywhere, and there's some Hispanic people sprinkled, and oh wow, there's the same white person I saw yesterday. So it kind of changed to that, that being the norm for several years until I finished out college there. But it's just kind of different because like it was kind of cool, but I never really stressed out about being the only one. But just the whole where the school was located was more kind of aggressive energy. Like it's located outside of Houston, and Houston to me was always more aggressive, faster paced. Like I remember being in the student center, and like you would have to get an attitude with like the customer service representative. Like you're like, your customer service, you're supposed to be like, how can I make your day better? I shouldn't have to be like, you will do this and you will do this now, just so you could actually do your job. But I don't know, you just have to go to that level in Houston, and I was just like, it's not this way in Austin. Why is it this way over here? So that made me kind of appreciate things in Austin more.
That's neat. That's a good positive perspective. Do you feel like Austin still has that same more relaxed energy?
It has it to a degree. I think it's becoming more skewed with like the influx of people from like different parts of the world or different parts of the states that are bringing like their ideologies. Like, okay, like dating profiles on like different like websites and stuff. I've seen stuff like that people post like into Hispanic, into white, absolutely no black. Like people posting stuff like this on their dating profiles. And you're like, wow. But open to friendship, but like these certain races and no black, yeah. So I'm used to seeing that a lot more. I don't know if it's always been that way, but since like entering the dating adult world, if it's become more known, especially now that we have internet versus like how it was like 14, 15 years ago when it was just getting started.
It still seems very backwards, so behind, you know?
Mm-hmm.
That in 2014, people are still saying that.
Yep.
Anything else in terms of maybe any of your personal thoughts on what your life is like now, and, you know, any final things? Maybe we've already kind of talked about how Austin has changed or not, but any sort of final thoughts around that?
I think I've pretty much come to the terms like assholes come in like all shades and colors. I mean, you can't spend your time getting like so frustrated because you meet the one asshole of the day that says you're the wrong color and you shouldn't have any kind of status, or like you're below status or subpar. Like you shouldn't. I've come to terms of just like realizing people just have different flavors, or people just have different ways of thinking, and if you keep letting it get to you, then that's just kind of gonna inhibit you from like making progress or doing things that you want to do. So, like it's like kind of like just accepting like people are not gonna agree, but like not letting that devalue your own worth, basically.
Did you have any questions
I
you wanted?
had one question. If you could speak to what would you do with other black friends that came in Austin that said, let's go do X at night? Where do you go that you feel is a place for the black group to go hang out, or black guys to hang out?
I would like ask them like what kind of scene they wanted. Like if they're gay or if they're straight, like what do you want to do tonight? Like, do you want to check out the warehouse district scene? Do you want a certain type of music that you want to hear? I would get that information first. Because like I kind of want to show like the pretty parts of Austin, or like the parts that I love. Like I was like, let's go to the 360 bridge. Let's like look over the water. I would kind of typically focus more on that versus what kind of entertainment for like I don't know, for black people or for Hispanic people or whatever. That's just what my default is.
Which is great. So do you feel like in Austin in general that the dividing lines work in ways like you mentioned your high school worked, where the separation becomes actually about scene, and you know, where you've got the kickers and the preppies or whatever in high school, that now as adults we have the rock music strip is Red River, the gay bars are Warehouse District, like that.
Yeah, I think it's like definitely a divide in the scene that people want to be in. I have had friends like say like Austin is not very black, and I go back and forth because I'm like, there's like so many black people in Austin. Why do people say there's no black people in Austin? But maybe, I don't know, maybe the more advertised scene is not where they are or where they want to be.
Do you still find or have moments where you're the only black person in a group, or one of two black people in a group, or?
I still have those moments every so often. I'm the only black male that works on my floor in my building at work. And then there's another black male that works on the floor above me. And the same black women. It's still the same dynamic. Like 20 years later. Like, oh, there's Perry, and oh, now he's with Matoka, now he's with Denise. So I guess that hasn't changed. Wow.
Contemplating that this is your opportunity to leave a little piece of history, and that this is one of those moments of, if you don't, contribute to the historical story, somebody else is going to tell the story.
Right.
So from that perspective, is there any final thing you wanted to add?
I would just say, be proud of who you are and know who you are, and don't let other people's ideals of what should be more accessible make you devalue who you are or what you stand for.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Perry.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you.